everybody from Tom Jones to Johnny Cash to Tool,
Right.
Prince, incredible career. How did you get started?
Well, I started in San Francisco with my own band, and I got a job as an assistant at a studio. I had some training in radio, so I got a starting position at a music studio, and I would sneak in the middle of the night and bring my band in and record them. And some people heard that, and they liked it, and so they started hiring me to do their projects too. So that kind of grew into me doing productions for several indie records, including a band called the Sea Hags in San Francisco, and I co-produced that with Kirk Hammett from, he was just joined Metallica at the time. He was very young. And that record actually got the Sea Hags a deal with Chrysalis Records, and but instead of them hiring me to do their next record, the big major label release, they hired Mike Klink and went to Los Angeles for that. And I realized, well, if I want to really have a career in music, I can't do it in, a career in recording, I can't do it in San Francisco. So I decided to move to LA. And there, when I started, I couldn't get a job at a studio, so I wound up working at Tower Records in the record store. And it was actually the best thing that could have happened, because I met the members of a group called Green Jello, and the drummer from that band was Danny Carey, who had another band called Tool, and that's how I got connected with Tool. And one thing led to another. I wound up recording the first Tool record, and it did really well. As well, that Green Jello record, crazy enough, that song Three Little Pigs went up to like number 20 on the singles chart at Billboard, and that was apparently a big deal
right.
at the time.
Attention.
Yeah, right.
People knocking on your door.
People knocking on the door. It was great.
Right. So, did you then move into a staff position at Larrabee Sound, or were you already at Larrabee when all this happened?
I was working on them from day one in Los Angeles, but it took a little while to get started, and when I got into Larrabee, then I learned how to use the SSL, and I really got into mixing. And the clients there at Larrabee were pretty high-end clients. There was Prince, and I wound up going outside of Larrabee and doing Prince engineering and mixing for a while, for about 3 years. And then Rick Rubin used to bring projects into Larrabee also, and I assisted that and connected with him and started doing independent projects with him. Usually I'll do vocals with a vocalist right next to me, with the vocal mic right there. We might have a partition between us, but there's no glass between us. So the communication is immediate, and I think that just helps so much because I give a lot of direction to vocalists when I'm recording.
The other challenge that you can face in a large space like that is bleed. Do you record all the instruments at once? Do you tend to do overdubs to bring all the different instruments in?
Well, it makes a difference what type of music you're doing, and it also makes a big difference if the band is ready for that kind of thing. If everyone's really well rehearsed, they know the song, I'll have everyone play. In fact, I'll have the singer also with a 58 on stage to just to lay down the basic tracks and go for a live take, and I'll keep all of it if I can, or just punch into little bits. They have to be a special band that can actually pull it off, though, and that's a challenge to find these days.
Right.
But either way, it works. And bleed, the live vocal with the band playing, we'll isolate the cabs downstairs. The guitar heads will be upstairs. When I say upstairs and downstairs, underneath the stage of this old theater were catacombs where we set up isolation booths for the guitar cabinets. So the cabinets were isolated, but the singer would be up there with the drummer singing, and sometimes very loud. But you'd be surprised at how little you would actually hear that in the final recording.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a little bleed is okay.
Right. The other thing you deal with in a large space like that is that there's a lot of ambience. how did you control if you wanted to have a drier take? If you didn't have
Right.
something that wasn't quite dry?
Well, imagine this room being the theater that I was recording in, and sometimes this is not as bright as the theater I was working in, but the drums would be cavernous, which is great in some recordings, especially when you crank some stereo compression on the rooms, you know, just pump it up and get it really exciting. But if I wanted to do a more intimate recording, like to have a tighter sound, I'd either take the drums out to the lobby of the theater, or I built a truss system with canvas panels, and I would build basically a room on the stage with these canvas panels that would control the cymbal bleed. And it was a really good system. I don't need it in the new space. I've moved out of the theater now and into a church, but I don't need to control the cymbals that way now. But in a big space like this, it's easy to find ways to control cymbal bleed, cymbal wash, let's say.
But you like to actually do quite a bit of what I guess I would call pre-mastering.
Pre-mastering, yeah.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that process involves?
Right. Well, it's I don't know if sometimes I feel like I'm cheating a little bit, but I like to finish a project with a comparison with what I'm working on with something that's currently on the radio. So I'll pick something that's on the radio, or I'll pick some reference material that I'm really familiar with that I did not produce, and I'll A/B it just to make sure my ears are not fooling me. And then I might actually, with a stereo bus EQ, shape the finished master to have some of the characteristics of a mastered and finished commercial record, depending on the music, of course. But that's the pre-mastering that I like to do, so that when anyone listens to even an unmastered finished recording that I've done, that it just jumps out of the speakers. There's no denying it. You know, there's nothing left to do except to maybe put a little sheen on the top and shape the bottom a little bit. And that's what I would hope a mastering engineer will do, is just finish it just every little bit, but not put their own stamp on it at all. So mastering engineers that actually listen, and a lot of them don't, they just have, this is my setting, you know. Well, I want you to actually listen to it. It doesn't need this. If it doesn't need it, don't touch it. That's the way I work.
Right, so you want to kind of protect it in a way.
Yes.
Right,
yeah.
provide it to them in a way
right.
that fits your vision of it.
I'll choose a mastering engineer that I know won't go too far with it.
So how do you approach the mixing process, given that you're involved in the tracking of most of the projects that you're mixing, I would assume? Do you say, okay, I know how this sounds, but I'm going to take it all down to zero and then I'm going to rebuild the mix? Or do you have a pretty much finished mix by the time you're done with the tracking?
Well, there is that. It's usually recorded in a way where, because commercial projects oftentimes get passed around to different mixers, I prepare for that ahead of time, and I kind of lay out my tracks so it's pre-mixed. So when another mixer comes in and pushes up the faders, you know, here's the left and right pair of main guitars, here's the left and right pair of this and that. This is the vocal sum, you know, so that they can't screw it up so bad. So I'll do pre-mixing basically, but the challenge is when I get to mix it to have fresh ears. So what I like to do is work with an engineer that I trust, who knows the way I like to work, and then I'll leave and I'll say, okay, so call me when you've got something, and I'll come in with fresh ears and see what they've got, and then I'll just be able to adjust this and this and this. And we're good. So
you mentioned using some of the microphones on this project. Do you have, the Johnny Cash project, do you have go-to microphones that you choose? If a band is coming in, you say, okay, put up this, put up this, put up this, put up this, or how do you approach that?
Yes, I do have very simple setup, actually. On the drums, I like 57s and 421s, basically SM98s on the top of the toms, and those are Shure mics, the 57 and the SM98s. 421s are Sennheiser on the kick drum and on the bottom of the toms, and I flip them out of phase with the top mics. For overheads, I use the Mojave MA200s, large diaphragm, tube mics, and on the hi-hat and the ride, I generally use a Shure SM81. I like also AT mics are great for hi-hat, and but that's generally my go-to mics, my go-to package for that. Bass, I like 421 Sennheiser generally. Guitar, 421 57s. Start there, you know, we might go get more adventurous. Vocals, I used to only use Telefunken U47 with my secret vocal chain, but I've actually changed that. I don't actually turn on the Telefunken anymore. I use a Mojave MA200. The MA200 is really my favorite high-end mic that I have right now.
You talked about different approaches to being a producer.
Right.
Because you ask most people, what does the producer do, and they'll have the answer of overseeing the session, or whatever it is.
Right.
But you actually broke it down into subcategories. There was the musician producer,
Yeah.
the engineer producer,
Yeah.
and the fan producer. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think you start your career as a producer coming from one of three directions. I came from the engineer side. There's musician producers that are, you know, like the Neptunes, Daniel Lanois, and Pharrell Williams. Those would be the musician type of producers. Then there's the fan producers, and that's like the Rick Rubin, who's just a fan, not a musician, not a technician in any way. He's all about the music and understanding the songs, and really listening from the music buyer's perspective, let's say, the music consumer's perspective. So from an engineer's perspective, from an engineering producer's perspective, I got into it because I was using the equipment as my instrument. And I've actually gotten better with being a musician since I've started producing. I learned how to play drums, I do a lot of vocals, I do a lot of backing vocals, I do vocal arrangements, I do string arrangements, and do a lot of really elaborate string arrangements now. So I've gotten better with that being the musician side. I've always been the fan. I guess all of us start there.
How do you find the bands you work with, or how do they find you? How do you choose a band that you're going to work with? And what's the production process like?
Well, I like to work with groups that are not following trends. I really like groups that are really carving their own path. And in fact, those groups may not ever be popular, but I hope that they're coming into it because they love the art of it, you know. So I worked recently with a bluegrass band that does progressive bluegrass, complicated rhythms, and several tempo changes during songs, and a real story arc that, you know, 7-minute songs with a story, really exciting and unusual. And that kind of thing really attracts me. And that's why I was excited about working with bands like Tool and System of a Down, because they were doing something that was radically different. And it was a miracle that they actually came to be popular. I mean, when you think about it, System of a Down was doing, you know, sugar, you know, with this quirky thing going on, and but that's what I love. So I'm always looking for something that's not typical, and then I can apply my weird production style onto it, which is, you know, I try to match the style of music with my production.
Right, right. So there's the production style, but there's also the music side of it. How involved are you in saying, change that verse? No, take that word out. I want this chord instead. Are you?
It depends on the project. I'll throw those things out into the room. a lot, not that they're all accepted, you know, and I'm not going to push my imprint on someone else's music, but I will make suggestions, and I do that quite a bit, yeah, definitely. And it was a bit of a challenge for me to get enough gumption and courage enough to do that in sessions, because some of the bands I've worked with are kind of scary, you know. You know what I mean? Like, oh boy, I think I was sitting on a plane coming back from a session with Slayer, sitting next to Tom Morello and Tom Morello, and he's like looking at me. He's like, "That better sound good." And I was like, "Whoa!" It sounded good. It did. But yeah, they're kind of scary. Some of them.
Right. So, working with someone like Slayer, Johnny Cash, you know, these artists who've had Tom Petty, these artists who've had an established career, do you feel a need to go in and put your own imprint on that, or do you feel that you should follow what they've done in the past, or how do you look at their heritage as a producer?
Well, someone like Tom Petty, they give you something really special right up front, and documenting that is the #1 priority. Giving them a little flavor of, I tend to use older tube or rack equipment that has a vintage flavor. So we're going to get a little bit of that 70s, maybe 70s honk with the stuff that I do. I prefer drier vocals, and I like distortion. So you're probably going to get a little bit of that with my production, but I don't want to imprint my thing on there. But you know, every producer, I think it's also a good thing if you can listen to an album and say, I know who produced that, but you still enjoy the artist for what they've done with the songs.